Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances to all the Vaishnavi devotees and Vaishnav devotees. My name is Jagannatheshwari Devi Dasi. That name was given to me by Prabhupada in 1975, and I'm from the UK. So the first time I saw Prabhupada, after a few weeks travelling on the road overland to India, was in Vrindavan temple. I joined in Vrindavan, and the day after I arrived, I got to see Prabhupada. He was there at the time, fortunately for me. So I got to find Vrindavan and Prabhupada both at the same time. So the day after I arrived, I was engaged in cleaning his house while he was out on his morning walk. And at 7 o'clock, when he came into the temple for greeting the deities, we came in from the other side, from the right side of the deities, coming from back from Prabhupada's house. So we were just a little late. So when we arrived, he was already in front of the altar of Radha Shyamasundar, taking darshan, offering his prayers. And that was the first time I got to see Prabhupada, which was a very amazing experience for me, which I can never forget. The first darshan of my spiritual master. It was really overwhelming because I never saw anyone like that, and I could understand that this was the person I'd been looking for. I had come to India to search for a guru, and by Krishna's mercy I found Prabhupada. And he was so effulgent and powerful, but at the same time very meek and humble, pure devotee of the Lord. And I immediately accepted him as my spiritual master. And I made my home in Vrindavan for some time. Altogether, I had 2 years of association with Prabhupada from December 1975 until November 1977. So only 2 years, but in that time I was fortunate enough to see Prabhupada quite a few times and to hear from him quite a number of times. Beginning from Vrindavan 75, and then in Mayapur, I was there for the Gaur-Purnima festival in 76 with Prabhupada, and then after that, when I returned to Vrindavan, I received my initiation from Prabhupada at the Krishna Balaram temple in the courtyard. I felt, and I still feel, very blessed. Then, when I returned to Bhaktivedanta Manor later that year, again, it was at the same time that Prabhupada arrived there. So I got to see him at the manor and hear him, his classes, his darshans. And then the next time I saw Prabhupada was again in Mayapur for the festival in 1977. And so actually at 3 different places in 77. Firstly in Mayapur, then at Bhaktivedanta Manor for his last visit. Prabhupada was very frail, and after seeing Prabhupada in that condition, and after his departure, returning to Vrindavan, I wanted to be there. Somehow or other, I managed to make it to Vrindavan just in time before he departed for the last darshan, which was a very devastating and traumatic experience. But at the same time, I feel fortunate to have been there for that. So basically, during the 2 phases of ISKCON, I joined in the 2nd phase. The first phase was in the early days of ISKCON, when it was still small, very intimate, friendly, family atmosphere, and each devotee had got a chance for personal association with Prabhupada, personal training. And then when ISKCON got bigger, then in the 2nd phase, there was not so much chance for us to have that direct access to Prabhupada. It was just not practical for Prabhupada to have to train up each one of us personally. So he set up the GBC body and the temple presidents, and the rest of us were to work under them. And we were not encouraged to request one-to-one meetings with Prabhupada or even to write letters. And I respected that directive. I didn't want to bother Prabhupada because I understood that he was very busy and I didn't want to increase his burden. And so for that reason, I never actually had a one-to-one conversation with Prabhupada, except, of course, for my initiation. And I never wrote to him either. But I was happy to just see him and hear from him in his classes and darshans. I felt in his presence very sheltered and secure, and I was learning so much from him. So I was satisfied. There was more of an awe and reverence mood around Prabhupada in the 2nd phase, so that kind of fed my feelings of unworthiness as well to associate with him directly. Then, after Prabhupada's departure, I felt his absence painfully, of course, like a hole in my heart. And I was finding it difficult at first to connect with him. Because when he was physically present, I felt safe and protected. But without him, without his physical presence, my life felt kind of empty. I continued to engage in service under the authorities, but I couldn't feel Prabhupada's presence very strongly at that time, even though I understood that he was present in his books. After Prabhupada's departure, I was serving in Ahmedabad temple, and then due to ill health I returned to the UK in the summer of 78, and I was serving with the Women's Sankirtan Party again, living in London. And the first time I remember feeling Prabhupada's presence again strongly was when the life-size deity was installed at Bhaktivedanta Manor, because it was a tangible form. I felt his presence, like the way we feel Krishna's presence in his deity form. After this, I was sent to South Africa by Jayatirtha. I was learning to experience Prabhupada's presence through his deity form, his books, audio tapes and videos, his teachings and instructions, and by following his instructions, chanting and engaging in devotional service. All of this was inspiring and sheltering. At the same time, I was not fully convinced that Prabhupada remembered me and was personally watching over me. I would have some doubts. Sometimes I would think, does Prabhupada actually remember me? Perhaps my faith was not strong enough to be convinced of that because we had never conversed together one-to-one when he was physically present, except for when he initiated me, of course. And at that time, I kept my eyes down because I felt unworthy. And so I didn't see him looking at me. I lost that opportunity because maybe I actually was unworthy. It was only when Prabhupada started to appear in my dreams, that's when I became fully convinced that Prabhupada remembered me, he knew me, he was watching over me, and he was my father. That was the breakthrough I needed to feel totally convinced that Prabhupada's watching over me personally. Without going into details, I can just say that every dream I've ever had with Prabhupada has been informal, intimate, and he's been very kind and caring, like a father, because he is my father. I still don't want to bother Prabhupada to have to come and visit me in my sleep when he has so many other disciples and followers to visit and keep an eye on. But still he comes from time to time out of his oceanic mercy and compassion just to reassure me of his love and care. Even from the spiritual world, he is still very busy looking after all of his disciples and followers. We should never doubt that. Every one of Prabhupada's disciples and followers has a personal relationship with him. The way to develop that, it's not only through his books and instructions, which of course is very important, Vapu, Vani over Vapu, but also by approaching him personally, praying to him and talking to him. This is incredibly important because he's always present. The good news is that he is much more accessible in his physical absence on the spiritual platform than he was in his physical presence. Think about it. The number of people who saw and heard from Prabhupada physically is already much less than the number of followers who have missed his physical presence. But for them, there's no loss. And so much mercy is available. Prabhupada is available for every one of his followers, not only for his disciples. Everyone has equal access. And those who are dedicated to his service can become just as close to him as any one of his disciples. Personally, I have lately been very much enjoying hearing memories of my god brothers and god sisters through the Prabhupada Memories videos. I especially enjoy hearing from those who have been blessed with prolonged and intimate association with Prabhupada. I love to hear these accounts of Prabhupada especially from the early days of ISKCON when it was a small family. These accounts of intimate association depict the most endearing qualities of Prabhupada as he interacted with his disciples, training them with a combination of strictness, humour, and love. When I hear these narrations, I feel as if I'm present there, as I get to know Prabhupada in a very human way, with all his beautiful facets. Listening to these narrations brings me closer and closer to Prabhupada. I am very grateful to my senior godbrothers and godsisters for sharing these experiences and thus bringing us all closer to Prabhupada. I cannot thank you enough for this. Even those disciples who appear to be disassociated from ISKCON, or who have taken shelter of other mats or other gurus, when they talk about Prabhupada, they manifest so much love and respect for Prabhupada that's never changed. It seems that every disciple remains loyal and faithful to Prabhupada, no matter what is their situation, because the life-changing effect he has had on them can never be erased. We're all part of his family eternally. As for myself, I feel that the purpose of my birth in this life is simply to serve Prabhupada. The sole purpose of my life is to assist Prabhupada with his sacred mission, for which he sacrificed everything to give Krishna consciousness to the world, and especially to the Western world, as is described in his pranam mantra. Nirvishesha shunyavadi paschatya deshatarina. With whatever time I have left in this world, I will try to do whatever I can to please Prabhupada by serving his mission in whatever way I can. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.